Here's a very simple bangle that I call spiral bangle. You can use very small beads but make the bangle look a bit chunkier because you've got this double wire effect. And I've got some lovely microfaceted gemstone beads from Charmers Gems for this one. So they're tiny little 2mm beads, but they'll look great with the bugle beads, and that will space them out along the length of the bangle. So to get started, you can choose the colour wire you want. I'm using 0.8 of a millimetre, that's just 20 gauge. And pick your whatever crystals or glass beads. Here you can see I've used sort of crystal faceted crystals and silver bugle beads, and that the height of the bugle bead sort of gives you the height of the bangle. And here I've used the crystals and with a copper wire, so you can see different versions look very different. I'm going to cut about 20 inches or so and double that length, so this is 0.8 of a millimetre. And the height of the bangle is really dependent on the beads that you're going to weave at the centre. So I'm using my round nose pliers to make a rounded end, and then I'll just check the height because I want to be able to fit my bugle and one of my little rose quartz microfaceted bead as well. So once I've got the height, I make sure that the wires run parallel, and to fix that so it doesn't move around and distort, I'm just going to hammer just the very end curve, and that will hold it in place. It will work harden it. Right, so now we're ready for a bit of weaving. I'm just going to straighten out these wires before we start so that they don't keep distorting. For the weaving, you're going to use 0.4 silver plated copper. If it's silver plate you're using, it doesn't really matter what colour wire you use for this. And you need to connect it and secure it right at the very end, so that doubled up end that you've just hammered. So do a few little connections there, and once it's on and secure and nicely fixed, just cut off any excess and then flatten it down, and then you can start adding and threading beads. So I'm going to start from that point, and I'm going to use a rose quartz. This is a 2mm rose quartz faceted bead. Then I'm going to use another little straight bead, one of the bugle beads. It's purple. I'm not sure if I need 3 or 2 at this point, so I'm just going to hold them at the center. Yeah, actually I just need the bead and the bugle. And then what you do is you wrap once around the side of the frame where it meets. So bring your wire in the center, one wrap around, and back down. Ready for your next threading and your next bead. So I'm just going to push that little bead up, pick up another bugle bead, and you're just going to go backwards and forwards every time you need to connect once completely around the frame of the bangle wire, that outer frame. And this gives a nice sort of zigzag pattern to your bangle. Equally, you could just use beads. You don't need to use bugle beads. Obviously, you can just use the microfaceted beads all the way along, or gemstone beads all the way along. You can make little coils and put them on. Anything goes. So zigzag along and it will fill up quite quickly if you use the bugles. Now you probably don't want to watch me doing it because I'm very slow when I'm doing this under a camera and I can't really see what I'm doing, but you want to go about 6 inches for the bangle length. So you want a bead at least 6 inches along. If you want something bigger, do 6.5. There we go. There's one I made earlier. So I've put about 6 inches of beads along. Now I'm just going to finish off, and I'm going to put 3 of the small little rose quartz bead to keep that gap. So to keep that spacing of the bangle, and they'll just come down as one bar for the end. So there we go, that goes there, keeps the gap, and I'm going to bind that around nice and tight, cut off the excess, neaten the ends, and now I'm left with about 1.5 inches of projecting wire, which is just enough to make some lovely spirals. So to make the spirals, go with your round nose pliers to the very, very ends, and you can see there little tiny loops, and then grip those with your flat nose pliers and curl and curl and curl. And there we have sort of a little bit of an open spiral. Now I always alternate, work from one, work on the other, and that way I can get the sort of the symmetry going. And once you're rolling the wire, you bring it close together again, so there's no gaps. And just keep spiraling right up to the very end of your beads. And try and push those spirals together. And there's the end. You could actually hammer that now, just the spirals obviously. Now to start shaping the bangle, you can use your fingers. Start doing it, easing the bangle around. And now if you've got a rolling pin or you've got a metal bangle mandrel like me, obviously that's the easiest. Just put it around. Always shape it slightly smaller than it's going to end up because it has a bit of spring in it. I'm only going to hammer the wire. Don't worry, I'm not going to smash the beads. So I was just tapping those ends, and really that is the actual finished tutorial, where you can see you've got the finished piece. You can slide it onto the side of your wrist and it will fit most wrist sizes. You can make these slightly bigger or slightly smaller depending on who you're making them for. So thank you for watching, and do subscribe to help me grow the channel. Many thanks for watching.